If this isn't enough to make you want to stick around and see how I made this, well then I don't know what will be, because this has turned out so good. I'm going to start with the roundover, and that's pretty straightforward. I've put a roundover bit into my router and I've tested on some scrap that I'm happy with the roundover it's putting in. And we're going to do most of the body with the router. I'm only going to stop up here by where the neck plate is because it gets quite tight and the roundover won't exactly suit it. So I'll bring the roundover to where I know I can stop. I'll start it again a little bit further down, and then I'll just manually blend those in with some sanding in a little while. So let me get set up and we'll just get routing. That's all of the rounding over done, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. There's still a tiny bit of finessing to do, but that's with the finer sandpapers later. I've managed to get the transition here, as you can see on this camera, I think, into the neck a little bit more fluid. I probably have a little bit more work here I can do just to take away some of the chunkiness here, but I'll do that when the neck is on and I have something to reference against. Speaking of which, the next thing I need to do is I need to start sanding the sides here. Now, the reason I need to start sanding these is because when I'm putting in the binding channel, they need to reference against the final width of the sides. If I put in the binding channel now and then I do my final sanding of the sides later, there'll be inconsistencies. So as horrible a job it is to do sanding of the side of the body, I'm afraid it's something that just has to be done. So I'm going to get at that. It's going to be very, very boring. You're just going to see me working with a hand sander and a couple of other little tools for getting into the corners and the crevices. But I'll just pop a few scenes of me doing boring sanding on screen and not put you all asleep. One of the tricks when you're sanding to make sure you're getting everything 100% flat is just to cross hatch with some pencil marks like this. And then when these are all gone, you know you've no high spots or low spots. So it's a really easy way to reference everything. And makes life a lot easier, especially if you're new to sanding, because, you know, it's easy to make mistakes. And you'll only really see the mistakes when you come to put finish on the guitar. So now's the time to get it right. Now try not to dwell in one spot. You can see me, I'm moving all the time, and that's important because if you dwell in one spot, you're only going to change the shape of the guitar, and we don't want that. I'm covered in sawdust, but I had the garage door open and there's been some fresh air going through, so it's not all in my lungs, thankfully, because I forgot to wear my mask. I guess I was just too in the moment. Now, everything is sanded on the sides and on the contour here, and they feel wonderful. They feel really, really good. The next thing I need to do is, while I have it in this state, is just carve in little recesses here so that I can pop my finger in and get these cavity covers off whenever I need access to behind. So I'm just going to take a second to set this up, mark out where I want these, and just get them carved. That was really, really straightforward. I've just carved two little scoops out of the okume here so that I can get my finger in and lift the cavity covers out when I need to get access to the stuff underneath. So just to give you a look at how that works, we'll pop this guy on and we'll pop the electronics cover on. And all I have to do is reach in like that and like this, and everything is really, really accessible. That's one more job done. Now I'm going to pop over and we're going to start doing the binding channel on the top. So I've put a binding routing bit into my router, and I'm going to come down all the way down as far as the okume. Now the binding isn't going to be this thick, right? So the guitar, as you can see here, is about 18 millimeters thick in terms of the maple cap on the top. The binding isn't. The binding's only about, I think it's about 6 or 8 mils. I'll check in a minute. But we are going to be carving down the top of this guitar. So we're going to bring the binding channel down one pass, then down deeper a second pass, and maybe a third, until we're just kissing the okume. And I'll put a piece of binding in so I will know where I can finish my carve and where I need to stop. It'll make more sense once we get into it. So let me get kitted up and we'll get this routed. We're nearly there. I just wanted to stop and show you progress along the way. I'll pop a picture up on screen now of the back part of this guitar here. But effectively the binding bearing has a cutter that's a little bit wider than the bearing it's riding on. So it cuts a rebate into the body for the binding to sit on. Now I still need to step it down a tiny bit more. I think maybe 2 more passes and we'll be there. I'm really glad to say the binding channels are done and they went well. It's always a little bit worrying when you start getting to the end of places like the horns here and you're expecting stuff to just snap off, but it doesn't, and that's a good feeling. This is the binding. I'm just going to pop it on screen here, and it's a flexible plastic. There's nothing really else to say about it, and as you can see here, it's just going to sit on that binding channel like that and be flush with the okume body at the bottom of the guitar, and then the maple top is going to start from there and make its carve up towards the center of the body. So I think that makes a little bit more sense now. In other words, all of this space from the top of the binding to here is what we're going to carve away. Now I'm going to cut off a tiny piece of binding, and I'm going to go around and just draw a pencil line in, sitting the binding in and drawing the pencil line with it the whole way around. And that will inform me then as to where I can put my carve. The next thing I need to do while the top is flat is identify where my controls are going to go. I'm going to have 3 controls on this guitar. There's going to be a volume, there's going to be a kill switch, and there's going to be a pickup selector. So just 3 holes need to be drilled. The only one I'm really concerned about right now is the volume position. So I'm just going to come in from the back, pop a little drill hole through to let me know where that is, and that'll give me my reference then for the others. So I'm just going to get that set up. Won't take long to do. This is going to be the volume control. I'll just pop it up here on screen. It's pretty straightforward. All I need to do is measure the thickness of the shaft that's going to go through the body, which I knew was going to be 9.3 mils because this is American sizing. I think is that 3/8 of an inch or something like that. I don't know why America just doesn't use millimeters. It would be a lot easier, but there we go. So I'm going to get a 9.3 millimeter drill bit. I actually bought some to have for this project, and I'm going to pop it in. If I just focus here for a second, you might be able to see, I'm going to get it as far forward here as I can go into this little cavity. And that will just give me, I guess, the closest placement I can get to having it in a really natural position while playing, to be able to go down and feather the volume control with my little finger. So yeah, I think around there, because that will give me access to all of the solder points on the front. If it's too far back here, I'll only end up burning the wood or marring it. So I think right about here should be okay. That's the, I'm going to say that's the easy stuff out of the way, even though none of it was particularly easy. The hard part now is carving down. The easiest way I can explain this is that I need to draw a line somewhere around here. I'm probably going to have to do that by hand and just blend in where the contours are going to meet the neck pocket. It's particularly challenging up here where the small part of the neck pocket is. I'm going to have a very shallow dip down for this, but that's a problem I'll worry about when I get there. When I have a line here drawn, I have a line on the side drawn as well, so I can come down at an angle, and I just want to do that. I just want to get it flat the whole way around, get that kind of taper down. And then when I have that, let's call it a 12 or 14 degree angle, I can come back in with sandpaper and curve that up. That's my plan. I don't know how successful it's going to be, and I'm going to admit right here and now, this is probably the most stressed I've been about the build, because this really is the aesthetics of the guitar. It has to be right. It's got to look right too. So there's really nothing else I can do other than just get at it. I'm going to draw the line I need around here, spend a bit of time refining that until I'm happy with it. And then once I am happy with it, gonna get carving. Well, off camera, I've drawn in the line that I'm going to carve the body to. Now, I think that line is okay, but I'm not really sure, and you never really know until you start the carve and figure it out. That said, it is a little bit intimidating, and I'm going to get right at it. To do this curve, I used a couple of techniques. One was I just held the pencil out and used my second finger as a guide to get this curve and this curve. The end here, I just used a circle of paper that was 17 centimeters wide and drew around that. And then to join up these bits here, I used some French curves that I bought in a local stationery shop for, I think they were like €3 or €4. They're really handy. Always good to have them in the studio. So the next bit, which is intimidating, is to start carving from these lines here down to the line we drew in with the binding. I'm not going to lie, it is really stressful, but there's a lot of tools at my disposal to see if I can get this right. The first thing is some shinto rasps. Now, not a lot of people realize that while there is one shinto rasp we all use, there is a second finer one on the market as well. Crimson Guitars in the UK bring this one in from the UK, and I think this one goes up to 24 teeth per inch, which is, you know, considered coarse and medium, and this one goes up to somewhere in the 30s in terms of teeth per inch, so that goes up to a fine rasp. I'm predominantly going to use those two to take out the bulk of the material, and then I'll be swapping over to some Iwasaki rasps as well, and maybe even the humble Stanley knife to try and carve away some of this. I'm not going to go to the line on either side because I want to get close to the line and then sand out all of the imperfections that are there. And then that will let me know that I'm close to where I want to hit. I'm about 3/4 of the way through this carve at the moment, and I just wanted to stop and give you a look at it, just to give you an idea of how much weight this has really taken off the body of the guitar. And I thought I was going to have to do the carve, as we said earlier, put in a facet and then round it up, but actually I don't need to do any of that because the curve here is so tight, it's almost created a recurve itself. And then the part back here, the flat, is actually really nice, and I'm just going to round over the top and it's going to be enough. So all I have left to do here, if I can just turn it around again, is this particular corner up here and into the lower horn. I'll give you a look at that there. Still a lot to do and still quite a lot of thickness to remove, but I should get it done this evening. It's now 9:30 at night, and my plan for the rest of this evening is get the carve finished and get some grain filler onto the back, because I would like to get that done this evening so I can come back tomorrow and sand it. So yeah, back to work, nearly there. There are no words for how happy I am with this. I was really stressed about carving the top on this guitar. Everybody who does a Les Paul has a different way of doing it. Some people step it down with routers. Other people just take an angle grinder to it. And I wasn't sure if approaching it with just files and rasps and sandpaper was the way to go, but it's what I knew. And I don't want to try something new on my second guitar with tools I haven't used before and ruin the guitar after getting so far with it. So this took a long time. This took probably 3 hours. My elbow is actually really sore, reminding me that I'm in my 40s. But my God, look at this. It's just such a different instrument. All that thickness and that big thick slab is gone. It's now just this really like thin and elegant guitar. I'm just going to see if I can get you guys to focus here. That double carve on the lower cutaway took me a while to figure out, but it's worked out great. And yeah, again, I don't know if the camera's going to focus on all of this. There we go, because the light isn't great. It's nighttime. Yeah, I'm really happy. It's so good. So just before I head up to bed for the night, I promised myself I'm going to get some grain filler on the body, on the Okume body on the back. So I'm just going to give everything a wipe down and start getting some grain filler in, and I can take my cavity covers off now because I have those little finger scoops. So yeah, bear with me. I'm going to get that set up and get applying some grain filler. It's the next day and the nitro-lac is fully cured. I didn't realise that when it cures, it pretty much turns to concrete, and it was really difficult to get it off. I ended up taking a random orbital sander to the back of this to remove what was there. Starting with 80 grit paper, it was that tough, and working my way up to 180. But it is beautifully smooth now and I'm very happy with it. Couple of learnings from that. The first is, because these cavity covers are so thin, they're also really flexible. Nitro-lac is water-based, and when I put it on one side of the cavity cover to fill the grain, it decided to warp. And it wasn't a one-off, the other cavity decided to warp too. They were bent like bananas. So I was able to use the trick where you spray water on the bent side, put it down on a sheet of plastic, wait about a minute and the moisture pulls it flat again, dried them off and put them under compressed weight for the rest of the evening for them to restore to their original shape. Thankfully they have, and I dodged a bullet there because I really just don't have enough wood to make these anymore. It has prepared me though for putting a stain on the back of the guitar because the stains are water-based too. So I'm going to need to tape these to something to stop them warping when I'm applying stain. That's a problem for later. The problem from now is that I now need to sand all of this nitrolac off the body of the guitar, well, off the sides of it at least. And it is quite tough and quite uneven. So I'm going to get set up and start sanding. I'm not going to make you sit through it, but I will do a couple of montage shots of me working my way through this. And when I come back from that, we're actually going to be able to start fitting the binding. And I'm really excited about that because it's a fun step and it transforms the look of the guitar completely. So let me get sanding and we'll be right back. That's all of the grain filler sanded away. I probably used a little bit too much, but it's not the end of the world. And I can see where the end grain now is filled, which is lovely. And the instrument is quite smooth and should be easy to finish. Famous last words. The next thing I want to do, as I mentioned, is install the binding. Now, it's actually a day later than when you just saw me recording. And it is 20 to 11 at night when I'm starting this recording. Because if I don't get the binding on today and let it glue overnight or let it bond overnight, it's going to be another day because I'll have to do it after work tomorrow and then it'll need another night to settle. And I have a deadline to try and get this guitar done in 5 days' time. And I don't have 5 days, I've got 5 nights. So it's pretty challenging because I've promised I'll put this on display at an exhibition in my workplace for 2 weeks. And that exhibition starts on Monday. And today is Wednesday. I'm putting this on display and the Telecaster I built. So am I going to get this finished? No, not even close. But I'm going to get it to a point where it looks like a guitar and it has finish on it and the pickups are in and the strings are on. I'll have to come back later and do all things like the fret dressing and the final setting up of the instrument and wire up the electronics. But at least I'll fit the electronics and they'll be in there. And it'll look good on a stand. Part of that, of course, as I said, is just sticking to the clock and getting this binding installed. Now, I played around with the binding last night and heat formed a little of it, and I'm in a pretty good place where I know I can conform some of this to curves already. And I've done a test fit of an offcut of the binding on a tiny piece of plywood here. I'll put a picture of this on screen now, just to make sure the method I'm using to bond this is going to be good enough. It was on the last guitar, but the last guitar's binding was from a different company, so I wanted to check. And it has worked out quite well. That's really just, I think, melted into the wood really is the only way to describe it. Now, how have I done that? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can bond binding to a guitar. Some people use acetone, some people use super glue. I'm using this. This is just standard paint thinners that you would use to wash out a spray gun. I used to be a spray painter and I usually have 5 litres of this on hand. So I'm going to pour some of this into the bottom of a drinks can I cut off because it won't melt through that, and brush it onto the back of the binding and then tape the binding in place with this tape that I've prepared here. It's kind of one of those jobs where you just need to work your way around bit by bit. The only advice I'll give you when you're doing this is, number one, make sure that you do coat the back of the binding liberally, that you sit it down, number two, onto the lip quite firmly so you know you're getting a very consistent finish around. And number three, when you're putting on tape, make sure that the tape is high tack, that it's very sticky, and make sure that you pull it as taut as possible to act as a clamp to hold the binding in place. It's going to take several hours for it to dry, but it will work. And it's just about taking your time now and getting everything set up correctly. So I'm going to get this up and running and I'm going to start binding it, and I'm going to try and capture it on the other camera to give you a look at what I'm doing, and then I'll finish the rest off camera and come back and just talk about how it went. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to start in this corner and work my way back here, and then I'll do the inner horn here towards the end when I know I can pull everything a little bit tighter. So right now I'm just going to grab a little paintbrush, and I have my thinners here, and I'm just going to pretty liberally coat the back of the binding. There we go. Tiny bit on the side as well. That's not as critical because we're not going to be able to really do much with it. But if I pop this in now, there we go. And now I need to start taping it. So as I mentioned, the quality of the tape you use is really, really important. This is 3M tape, and it just does not mess around. I am really happy with that. So that's a start. We have a saying in Irish, "Tu smach leat na hibre," which basically means a good start is half the work. I'm very nearly at the end of putting in the binding. It's not been without its mishaps. I have had one or two little trails of thinners go down into the body. Really, really such a small thing to worry about because we can sand all that back out. So I've come around the difficult part of the lower horn here, and I just need to come in here now and finish this off. It is a little bit sprung at the moment, but I think once I have it taped in place, that should be okay. And I do want to see if I can fold it back a little bit here and get it to blend a little bit more with the contour that I've carved in. So it's pretty much rinse and repeat. I'm just going to keep applying some thinners here and then tape it all up as tight as I can. I should point out at this stage that the thinners are actually dissolving the bristles on the brush. So I'm glad I'm getting it all done now, because if I came back in the morning, I might not actually have a brush to work with. One thing I'm doing as well as I'm going is I'm putting thinners on in advance of the sections I want to do. Even though I'm only probably taping up an inch at a time, I'm applying thinners probably 3 inches out. And the reason for that is just to start the melting of the plastic, to give it something to adhere to a little bit better. And so with that, it is now 10 to midnight. I'm finished with the binding in terms of adhering it on. It's got to set overnight. I've got to come back tomorrow after work and take all the tape off and then sand off any of the marks where the thinners have leached into the body. I think that'll be relatively okay to fix, and just tidy up any gaps that may have appeared where I may not have gotten it perfect. I'm pretty sure we got it damn close, but you won't know for certain until you take the tape off, and there's always a bit of fun and excitement and trepidation at that. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to go to bed and go to work and come back tomorrow and pick it up, but I'm really glad we got this done. It really looks the part now, and I think it's going to make such a difference to the look of the instrument. It's going to be much smarter, because my plan is to darken the top here with some stains, and the black binding with the black ebony fingerboard really should set that off quite nicely. All right, see you tomorrow. I'm glad to say it's a good outcome. The binding does appear to have bonded with the guitar, which is great, and it just sets it off really smartly at the top. So yeah, I'm going to start drilling some holes and get set up for that. But right now, could not be happier with how that turned out. I'm set up now to drill my path in. I've measured my depths down to sort of the bottom of the pickup hole, raise that up about 1 millimeter so my drill bit doesn't score the bottom of it, and then come to half the thickness of my auger. The auger drill I'm using is 6mm because I have a 6mm dowel I can plug the front hole up with when I'm done. And I'm going to go through the neck hole from pickup cavity number 1 to pickup number cavity 2 and stop there for a minute before we go into the electronics cavity. So I'm just going to do this one now. I've set up this bit of scrap wood here to allow the drill bit to have something to ride on and to try and keep it as flat as possible. That's just to give me a better chance of success, really. And I have it propped up on assorted crap from the workshop just to make sure everything's pretty stable. I think it'll be fine, but I'm just going to drill it and see how it goes. Okay, we're through the first part, so we'll just keep going. It's going to get a bit squeaky now as it tries to work its way free, but we'll just keep going and hope for the best. And I hope that's clear on camera, but we're through, which is great. All right, drill bits like that are a one-time purchase, but once you have them, they make the job so much easier. Now, this is a 6mm dowel because we drilled a 6mm hole. I think it's either spruce or it's fir, and I just picked it up in my local hardware shop here, and I'm just going to pop it through the hole, get a rough idea on the measurement that I need. I'll be flush trimming this later, so it really, at this stage, doesn't matter how long it is. As long as it's not 6 inches long and I'm wasting dowel. So around about there is good. And I'm just going to cut that and then glue it into place. Easy as that. Really easy, actually. As this wants to go in, there's naturally going to be a little bit of squeeze out, which is fine. But the PVA glue is also going to cause that dowel to swell in there and give us a really, really tight joint, which is exactly what we want. That's going to take a little bit of time to dry, and I'll be able to just take the chisel to that and flush trim it, and it'll just neaten up that pocket. Some manufacturers don't do this. I've seen Fender guitars where they just leave the hole, and for the sake of 2 minutes work, why would you not fill it in? It's just a much neater approach. Now I need to drill from the bridge cavity into the electronics cavity, and because there's going to be twice the cables going through now, including the neck pickup and the bridge pickup, I need a slightly bigger hole. So I went out this morning and bought an 8mm auger bit to complete this task, and I'm just going to pop some tape down here to protect the body as I drill in. I've roughly marked the line where I need to go, and I'm pretty confident I'm going to get it right, but you never really know until you actually start doing it. And I want to keep this as shallow as possible. So I'm going to try and come in with my drill bit as low as I can and just follow the angle. So I've come through pretty much exactly where I was hoping to come through. I don't know if this will come out on camera, but we'll try. Here. There we go. I'm after coming through just in the corner of the cavity here, which is exactly where I wanted to be. And I'm going to put that down to a little bit of planning, but mostly blind luck, which is great. I did mar the pickup a tiny bit here, but that's nothing I can't sand out. And you saw me switching over to having a metal ruler here, which I probably should have done the first time around just to protect that. Really happy with this. The next thing I need to do now is start planning my additional controls here. Now, these are quite challenging for me because the body's quite thick and I don't want to come up from the rear with the connections because it never really looks good. I want to dish these down instead. And I've gotten some special router bits to do that. and I've 3D printed some jigs for it, and I'm going to get set up over at the drill press to get these done. And when they're done, we're going to do some final sanding of the top, and then that is pretty much all of the construction of the body completely finished, and we can move on to prepping it for finish, which is honestly pretty exciting. I have my hole drilled here already from my control, which is 9.3 millimeters in diameter. The challenge I have now is that because this is a curved surface, it's very difficult to line this up with this with no point of reference. So I've 3D printed this little guy. It's a cup at the top, which is the diameter of the cutter, and it's 9.3 millimeters at the bottom in terms of a shaft. So I can pop it up here, as you can see, and it roughly fits. And then when I pop this down into the hole like so, I'll see if I can do this without messing up the camera angle, and then bring my router bit down. It does seem to be pretty centered. Hard to know if it's perfect, but it does seem to be pretty good. And when I take out this piece and I lower the router bit down manually, it does appear to be mostly centered on the piece. I can just roughly move this around and try and get a feel for where the cutters are landing on it. And yeah, that should let us route this out and dish down. This is very stressful because this is teetering here on the edge, and I'm routing into my beautiful guitar. But I did do this with a piece of scrap maple earlier today, and it worked out. So I'm quietly hopeful it'll work out today too. So let me get set up and we'll get recording the first one we need to do. All of the planning for the controls worked out really well, and I kept it really simple just to go in a straight line in line with the pickups and the bridge, because I was trying around, would I do some sort of triangular placement, follow the curve of the guitar, and ultimately simple worked really, really well. That's pretty much everything done on the body in terms of the construction, and you can tell I'm breathing a sigh of relief because it's not easy. The only thing I'm missing is the jack socket and the strap locks. The strap locks I have inside, they'll go on later. And the jack socket's in the post and it didn't get here yet. But that's really easy. I just need to go through with a Forstner bit into the cavity and bolt on a plate with 4 screws. This is how it's looking. Looking really sharp, really smart. I'm just could not be happier with it. I have off camera sanded it to about 220 grit everywhere. And I used a very bright light shining to cast shadows to make sure there were no hollows or some scratches that I missed, and there were, and I've gone back over as many of those as I possibly can. The next thing I need to do is what's called popping the grain. Now I've done it on the top here, and you can kind of see, you might be able to see in the camera, that this area here is a little darker than here. All I've done is I've misted some water onto the body of the guitar. The reason we do that is wood is just made up of fibers held together by something called lignum. And when we sand, we sever those fibers, and a lot of them just lie flat on the surface of whatever wood you're working on. But later when you apply your protective finish or your stains, they curl back up, and we don't want that. So we're forcing them to curl now with the water, and once the water dries and flashes off, we'll be able to sand those back. And you can already feel a texture change. This was really smooth when I sanded it, and now as I'm touching it, it feels like somebody's sprinkled like fluff or sawdust all over it. It's that much of a difference, and that's what makes it pop. I do need to spray the sides and the back now, so I'm going to do that on camera, and it's just, you know, a liberal little misting, and I'm going to dry a lot of this off anyway. I'm just putting on as much as I can do now, and that will later give me an idea of what this is actually going to look like finished, which, by the way, is really nice. Yeah, I really like this. Okay, that's very wet. So I'm just making sure everything got a little bit of a spray. Missed a bit here. Missed a bit with the mist. And missed a tiny bit here. That wood is going to be stunning when there's finish on it. Okay, let's start drying that off. And the reason we're drying it off is you don't actually need a whole lot of moisture. A tiny bit will do, and it will air dry quite quickly. Like this should be ready to sand back in 20 minutes, 30 at the outset. Now I am trying to avoid getting the fibres of the blue paper down into the body of the guitar too, because that's something we really want to avoid. The top here is nearly dry already, so that's great. In fact, I'm probably going to flip it over and let the front of it sit on the gecko blocks. If you haven't seen gecko blocks, by the way, they're made by two other guitar makers, Todd and Gio from Sweet Tea Guitars and Tornelli Guitars. They set up a company called Bench Critters making tools for woodworkers, and the gecko blocks are one of their, I guess, their stars. And if you go to my channel, I've got a review of these. They're very cheap and they're just such an excellent addition to anybody's workshop. Missed a tiny bit there as well, so I'm just going to catch that. Okay, we're dry, which is nice, and it is as furry as a piece of wood can be. I'll put a picture on the screen now that I took with my phone, and you can see where the end grain just no longer wants to be part of the equation and is sticking up. So our job now is to knock all that down, and I have a few different sanding tools here with me. I'm going to start with the top, and I'm going to use 240, I think, yeah, 240 grit to do the bulk of the work. And if there's anything that needs a bit more attention just to finesse it a little bit, I have some 400 here as well. Really important when you're sanding, sand with a block, always, otherwise you'll create divots. And try and sand with the grain too. So the grain in this wood is going forwards like this, and I do want to go with it rather than causing lateral damage across the wood. Now I can already feel that the wood is still a little damp by the friction in the paper, but it's good enough for us to do this now. So now it's time to do the back, and there's really not a whole lot different here, apart from the fact that where we have the roundover, we've exposed a lot of end grain. Now, a lot of that is filled because we did use grain filler earlier with the nitrolac, but we still need just to be a little cautious around it and make sure that any of these high spots are just treated and knocked down. So again, following everything with the block, keeping the angle consistent. I lied at the start of the video and I said I was going to get you to the point where I'd show you the guitar finished, but this video is actually going on a really long time. I'm recording this in the middle of editing, and I've realized I'm 45 minutes in and I've got another 45 minutes of footage recorded for the next episode. So rather than try and put together an hour-and-a-half episode, which nobody will watch, I mean, I think we all know that, I'm going to cut this at 45 minutes. I'm going away on holidays tomorrow for 2 weeks, and when I'm back, I'll edit the next episode and we'll get that up pretty quickly. So hopefully in about 3 weeks, I'm going to say 4 weeks time to give myself a little bit of time, because we all know how punctual I am when it comes to publishing videos. There'll be a new one up on the channel. And in the meantime, if you could like, comment and subscribe, all those good things. At the time of recording this, I'm at 820 subscribers, which is honestly pretty damn good. 820 people are not bored of me yet. But I would love to get that to 1,000 in the next couple of weeks. So If you can share this video with your friends, if you can share it on social media, even just throwing in a comment, it's a huge help and I really appreciate it. So yeah, thanks for watching. Sorry for the abrupt ending and I'll see you in the next one.